Let me take you back. 3 years ago, I was a completely different version of myself. Not worse, not better, just smaller. I worked at a mid-sized marketing company, the kind of place that had motivational quotes on the walls and passive-aggressive energy in the meeting rooms. The kind of place where everyone smiled during the all-hands meeting and complained in the parking lot after. I'd been there 4 years. I knew everyone. I thought I knew where I stood. My direct team was 6 people. And at first glance, we looked like the kind of team that worked well together. We had lunch together. We had a group chat. We celebrated each other's birthdays. We store-bought cake in the break room. But teams like that, friendly on the surface teams, have a hidden architecture, a pecking order that nobody names out loud, but everyone feels. And in our team, that pecking order was controlled by one person. His name was Derek. Derek was the kind of guy who could make you feel included and excluded at the exact same time. He had this skill, this social weaponry of building a group identity around quietly making fun of whoever was lowest on the ladder. And for a long time, the person lowest on that ladder wasn't me. It was a quiet guy named Paul who eventually left for another company. When Paul left, I didn't realize it then, but I should have. The ladder shifted, and someone had to be at the bottom. Now, you might be wondering what being mocked to your face actually looked like in a professional setting. Because it wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't the kind of thing you could report to HR with a clear conscience. It was something much harder to prove and much harder to survive. It started with small things. I would make a point in a meeting. Silence. Then Derek would make the exact same point 3 minutes later, slightly rephrased, and everyone would nod and write it down. I'd share an idea in the group chat. No response. The next morning, Derek would present that idea as his own. And when I'd say, "Oh, I actually mentioned that yesterday," someone would say, "Ha, yeah, great minds think alike." And the conversation would move on. I started second-guessing myself. Was my delivery off? Was I not making sense? Was I being too sensitive? Because here's the thing about being gaslit slowly. The first person you start to doubt isn't the one doing it. It's yourself. Then came the incident that changed everything. The one that moved from background noise to something I couldn't unhear. We had a quarterly presentation. Each team member had to pitch an initiative for the next quarter. 5 minutes in front of the full department. 30 people, including our director, Sandra. I had spent 2 weeks on mine, genuinely. I'd researched case studies, built a clean deck, rehearsed my timing. I was nervous. I was always nervous in front of groups, but I was ready. I went third. I stood up. I clicked to my first slide. I started talking. And about 45 seconds in, I heard it. A sound, low, quickly swallowed. A laugh. I glanced to the left. Derek had his hand over his mouth. His eyes were bright. He leaned slightly toward the person next to him, Jamie, and whatever he whispered made Jamie press his lips together hard, shoulders shaking. I kept going. I don't know how. The words kept coming out of my mouth while something inside me went very, very still. By the time I hit slide 3, it had spread. Not the whole room, but enough. Little smiles, averted eyes. The particular tension of people trying not to react to something funny. I finished my presentation. I sat down. Sandra said, "Good, thank you," and moved on. And I sat there for the remaining 40 minutes of that meeting, feeling absolutely, completely alone in a room full of people I saw every single day. After the meeting, I went to the bathroom, locked the stall, stood there for 4 minutes. I wasn't crying. I was past crying. I was doing something more dangerous. I was deciding. Now here's where most people, and I mean most people, make one of two mistakes. They either explode, confront, make it messy and emotional and easy to dismiss. Or they shrink, go quiet, let it become the story they tell themselves in the dark. This is just how it is. I just have to endure it. I did neither. What I did instead, nobody in that room expected. And honestly, neither did I. I want to be honest with you about what happened next. Because in the version of this story that plays out in movies, the main character goes home, has a montage, gets a makeover, and returns triumphant within the Real week. Life doesn't work that way. What actually happened was messier and more interesting. I went home that night and wrote out, longhand in a notebook, every single moment over the past 8 months where I had felt invisible, dismissed, or mocked. 4 pages, front and back. Then I did something that felt strange at the time. I read it back to myself not with anger, but with curiosity. What pattern am I not seeing? And there it was. Every single incident on those pages had one thing in common. It happened in public, in front of an audience. Derek never mocked me one-on-one. He was actually perfectly civil in private, almost warm. He needed an audience. The performance required witnesses. Because what he was doing wasn't just about me, it was about building his own status by publicly lowering mine. Which meant one thing: if I was going to end this, I didn't need to confront Derek. I needed to change what the audience saw when they looked at me. So I made a plan. Not a revenge plan, at least not in the petty sense. A positioning plan. I started doing 3 things differently. First, I stopped sharing ideas in the group chat and started bringing them directly to Sandra in brief, one-on-one check-ins. No audience for Derek to perform in front of. Just me and my director. Second, I started documenting everything, every contribution, every project, every outcome, tracked quietly in a running document I sent Sandra as a monthly update. Not complaining, just visibility. Third, I enrolled in a presenting skills course on my own time. Because even if Derek's reaction to my presentation was malicious, I knew my nerves had handed him the opening. I wasn't going to give him that again. None of this felt dramatic. None of it felt satisfying in the moment. In fact, for the first 6 weeks, nothing visibly changed at all. Derek kept doing what Derek did. The team kept laughing. And I kept showing up, quietly, deliberately, like a person building something underground. Now I need to stop here and tell you about the day everything cracked open, because I didn't plan this part. I didn't engineer it. I didn't see it coming. It just happened. The way things do when pressure has been building in silence for long enough. And when it broke fast. 6 months after the presentation incident, our company landed a major new client. A brand we'd been pitching for over a year. Sandra called the department meeting, all 30 of us, to announce it and to assign the lead creative strategy team. There were 3 spots, senior positions, the kind that come with visibility, budget authority, and, let's be honest, a significant boost in how you're perceived inside the company. Derek assumed he was getting one. Loudly assumed it, in fact. I'd heard him talking about it in the hallway for 2 weeks. Sandra opened the meeting. She talked about the client. She talked about the scope. And then she named the 3 leads. My name was the first one, she said. I want to describe what happened in that room in the next 5 seconds. 30 people all had some version of the same reaction, but the one I'll never forget was Derek's. He went completely still. Not angry, not upset. Something more specific than either of those things. Like confused. He was looking at me and genuinely trying to reconcile the person he'd been laughing at with the person Sandra had just called out by name first. As the lead on the company's biggest account of the year, Sandra continued. The meeting moved on, but the room had changed. After the meeting, people came up to me, congratulated me. People who hadn't initiated a conversation with me in months were suddenly warm, suddenly engaged, suddenly interested in what I thought. And here's the thing I wasn't prepared for. It didn't feel as good as I thought it would, because I wasn't angry anymore. And without the anger, I could see something I hadn't been able to see before. Every person in that team had made a choice. They'd chosen to follow Derek's social lead because it was easier, because belonging to the group felt safer than defending the person outside it. Most of them weren't cruel. They were just cowardly. And I had been cowardly too before all of this in ways I hadn't fully admitted to myself. There was one more moment, the one that the internet called the ending that shocked everyone. And honestly, I understand why. I've told this story to a few people before I shared it more widely. And every single time, they all ask the same question before I get to the end. What did you say to Derek? And the answer surprises them every time. Because it wasn't what they expected. It wasn't what I expected either. 2 days after the announcement, Derek came to my desk. He looked different than he usually did, slightly unsure of himself, which I realized I had never seen before. He said, "Hey, just wanted to say congratulations. That's a big deal. You deserved it." The old version of me would have said, "Thank you," quickly and looked away. Instead, I looked at him for a moment and I said, "Derek, can I ask you something honestly?" He nodded. I said, "During my presentation 6 months ago, what was funny?" Silence moment in script. Let it breathe. He blinked, opened his mouth, closed it. I wasn't angry when I said it. My voice was even. I actually wanted to know. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, and I'll give him this at least. He didn't pretend he didn't know what I meant. He said, "Nothing was funny. I was being an idiot. I was threatened by you, and I didn't know how to handle that. So I made it into something else." Threatened by me. Before Sandra's announcement. Before any of the recognition. He'd seen something in me that I hadn't fully seen in myself yet. And instead of responding to it with respect, he tried to make it small. Because small was safer for him. I sat with that for a second. Then I said, "Okay, thank you for saying that." And I meant it. Not because it fixed anything. Not because the 8 months of being made to feel invisible just dissolved in that moment. But because it was the truth. And the truth was more useful to me than the apology. We never became friends. We were professional, cordial. And that was fine. Because this story was never really about Derek. It was about the 4 pages in the notebook. The presenting class I took on a Tuesday night when I was exhausted. The one-on-one meetings with Sandra when part of me wanted to just go home. It was about the decision I made in that bathroom stall. To build something instead of burn something down. Here's what I want to leave you with. When Derek said, "I was threatened by you," he was telling me something that I think a lot of people who mock others never actually say out loud. Most public humiliation isn't about the person being humiliated. It's about the person doing it, what they're afraid of, what they're protecting, what they can't stand to see in someone else because they've stopped believing they can have it themselves. The people who laughed in that room weren't laughing at me. They were laughing at whatever Derek needed them to laugh at so he could feel safe. And I spent 8 months thinking it was about my worth when it was about his fear. So here's my question to you, and I want you to think about this honestly before you answer. Has someone ever mocked you or dismissed you, and later you realized it had nothing to do with you at all? Or flip it. Have you ever been the one in the room who laughed because it was easier than being the person who didn't? Because I think most of us have been both. Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one. And if this hit you somewhere real, share it. Because somebody in your life needs to hear that being underestimated is not the same as being wrong. Subscribe if you want more stories like this. Real, complicated, and honest. I'll see you in the next one.